Okay, good afternoon, class. I'm going to do a quick screencast giving general feedback on the NEA, which may or may not be relevant to you. What I've done in each of your pieces is I've offered mainly targets, because I think the most important thing is not to give you congratulation at this point, but really to tell you what you need to do. Now, Alice Johnson, those numbers are not to be added up. They are, in fact, just me numbering the points. And that's because I intend to sit with you and to say, number one, this is the problem. Why am I doing that? Well, research shows that if you sit and discuss and point to things with a student, that is much better than our school's box and bubble policy, okay? I maybe shouldn't put that on video, but a dialogic approach to marking has been shown to be the best, and that's what I will do. I will sit with you and say, this is my opinion, this is what I think you need to do. You could record that on your phone, and I think that you will find that quite helpful. Okay, so what is it that I want to say today? Well, beginning with introductions, I was frequently unimpressed with introductions because they don't achieve what they should do, which is to answer the question, or at least to show how this question will be addressed. So I'm looking for, as I say here, sharp, focused introductions with a very clear thesis. And I'm going to take that to the point that you should set the debate going. There should be a genuine debate that runs throughout the essay. You know, one way of seeing it is this, one way is this. This essay is going to have a look at it. But you don't need to write it in that mechanical way. Too many of you have written very dull, mechanical ones where you might as well have said, in this essay I'm going to discuss this. Of course, don't forget to have some imagination. It might be that you plunge the reader into some of the background of the poems or the poets, or some of the political messaging, or something really significant and engaging. It's the first thing that the examiner reads. So if you're looking for 23 upwards, it's got to be engaging, it's got to be interesting. It does have to be relatively short and concise. It shouldn't be choked with detail. So cut out quotations, which I spelt wrongly, shamefully, and this will live forever now, over there. And do inject a little bit of imagination. So imagination, good, but most importantly, does it explain how I'm going to address the question, how I'm creating a debate, have I defined some of the key terms, and does it kind of whet the reader's appetite and make them want to read more? Now, in terms of argument, or AO3, a few things I noticed. Some of you don't know how to write topic sentences, and this will be good revision for the exam. The topic sentence should directly address the question. You can use synonyms. You don't have to use the exact wording of the question. But it's good to frame the paragraph with a sentence which shows what that sentence, what that paragraph is going to be about, and it should directly link to your title. I notice quite often there's a lack of coherence or flow in terms of your paragraphs, and I've often indicated that to you. Now, it may be that you have a bad sequence of ideas, that there's a lack of logic and connection, or it may be a grammatical a kind of semantic thing where you need to put in some connectives, linking phrases, additives such as moreover, furthermore. So it could be one of those two things, either a logic thing or it could be a grammar connective kind of thing, okay? So please look at that, yeah? I did notice quite often sometimes the links between the poems are not clear. So it's a very good idea, especially if in mid-paragraph you're linking to another poem, write a very clear comparative statement. This echoes this poem, or this theme is also picked up in the following poem. Signal to your reader exactly how you are connecting. And of course you can connect through contrast. You could say this sharply contrasts, etc. I'll say a bit more about expression in a moment, but please do use adverbs, such as sharply, hauntingly, etc. These are beautiful units of meaning that really do add a great deal to verbs, okay? I think there's often poor transitions between paragraphs. So there must be a sense of flow and connection. So the next paragraph should begin more or less where you left off, or it should very clearly be demarcated as connecting to a similar idea or a contrasting idea. So use very, very clear signals to the reader. Is this going to be an additive paragraph, or is it going to be a contrastive paragraph? Okay. I think sometimes there's an insufficient use of your key terms, especially if you have a quotation. That quotation shouldn't be decorative. It should be woven throughout the argument. It should anchor and control the argument, and it should be appearing in clincher sentences that pull paragraphs together. Now, this links really to two things, to expression and grammar. There is quite a lot of repetition sometimes in your essays. That needs to be cut. You need to get rid of it or say something new or make it more concise. And sometimes you guys are being very verbose or prolix. Sometimes I look at a very long sentence, I think it could be cut down. There's no great virtue in being long-winded at all. So whilst I love beautiful vocabulary, it should be used with precision and concision, if possible. In many cases, I think you could cut down the length of your paragraph. Some of them feel a little bit bloated. So look at cutting and really make sure that you stick to the 1,500 word limit. Okay? Moving on to AO2. Sometimes the problem with the AO2 is suspect quotation choices. You want to say something, but actually the quotation doesn't really do that for you. So in certain cases, I want to look at your quotations and say, are they apposite? Have I chosen well? Do they really achieve what I want to do? If so, ditch that quotation and get one that is better for you, because the AO2 analysis must follow logically from the quotation. And I've always said good quotations, the main quotation is an entire paragraph. It has like a swag element to it. You can really drill down on the word level meaning. You can say something about structure. You can say something about context. In general, structure and form is not as good as language. And that's something that I saw earlier. So looking at tetrameter, looking at different types of meter, jamon, susura, even rhythm and flow, etc. I'll do it at the end. Now, often your analysis is clear. Sometimes it's detailed, but very rarely can I say that it is genuinely perceptive. Perceptive means that the reader goes, wow, that's really interesting. Hadn't thought about that before. Or it's really illuminating. So a lot of you are asking me, how can I get in band 5? It's always very difficult in English to answer that question, isn't it? But as an examiner, you know it when you see it. It's when you sit up and think, that is really perceptive. That goes beyond surface meanings and depth. That goes into real originality and freshness of thought and ideas. Hard to teach that, really. I think single word analysis can be very good, swag. But we saw with the examiner when I asked him the question, just drilling down on a word and saying the word bread might mean this, might mean that. Quite often it's just redundant, isn't it? So if you are going to swag a word or a phrase or something, make sure that it is absolutely pertinent to your argument and that it adds something to your argument. Don't forget that rival readings are beautiful. You could give especially when you're using a critic, you can say, this is an interesting view. However, a stronger reading, a more compelling reading, a more nuanced reading, a richer reading would do the following. A lot of you aren't doing that. You're not giving the rival interpretations. It's good to give rival interpretations and then evaluate and rank them, giving a sense of hierarchy. So it's a nice thing to get into your coursework. It's also a good thing for exams too. Now, AO1 context. The main problem that I found with AO1 context was that it wasn't always integrated into arguments. That often happens when you put the context before the quotation. Either the context should follow the AO2 or combine with the AO2. If you do that, then you won't just be padding the paragraph with lots of little history, it will be part of the interpretation, and it will run in to the general analysis element of a sweaty paragraph, okay? Whilst I don't think you slavishly have to follow sweaty paragraphs, pretty much all literature paragraphs have a similar structure, whether you're using P or peel or sweaty. They all have the idea that at the center is analysis, isn't it? And that analysis, as you do the clincher or the Y in sweaty or the L in peel, comes back to the question, bringing the AO2 analysis and showing that it is deeply relevant to answer the question. I also noticed that sometimes the context doesn't really do anything. It just feels like padding. Does it illuminate the interpretations? Does it make them more interesting? Are you showing how the cultural context actually influences either the writing or the reception of the text? Okay. Have you said something about the context of production when it was written and the context of reception when it's been read? Those are two very different types of contexts, aren't they? Often, as I say here, citations are missing, and at times context is used a bit crudely. Catholics believe this. Women in the 19th century were like this. Men tend to think like this. Okay. As soon as you find yourself thinking in those crude generalizations, you know you're talking rubbish, and you know that it's not scholarly. And I also think that you need to produce citations. So if you're making claims about India, about elements of Hinduism, or whatever it is, to me, that should be anchored in a citation to give it some credibility. Otherwise, it just becomes an assertion. So I think quite a few of you are short, and I'll say a bit more about citations next. Yes, so critics are often missing. There's sometimes a lack of critics. Sometimes critics are simply used. I would much prefer to see them evaluated. You know what I mean? In a highly provocative, illuminating account. Ailey Fraser pointed out that Scotland is a far superior nation, etc. Whilst this could be challenged, you know, I'd like to see that there's a little bit of evaluation of the critic rather than the critic just being put in there. And hardly anyone does that, yeah? I often think that, as I say, the citations are missing. And I think that it would be, again, look at that terrible error there. Gosh, you can't get the teachers today. It's because I'm such a bad typist. Evaluation, absolutely crucial and necessary, guys. Now, expression vocabulary. It's good to have ambitious vocabulary. But just using highfalutin language for the sake of it is kind of quite annoying, and it creates a word salad, doesn't it? Yeah. So I like beautiful, ambitious vocabulary that's used with precision and used with some economy. I remember the beautiful thing that my English teacher told me about semicolons. Like glasses of champagne should be had rarely. And I would say the same thing, guys, although obviously drinking alcohol is wrong. Glasses of non-alcoholic champagne should be drunken very rarely. So do use multiple adjectives at times. 2 or 3 adjectives, if you feel that they add to the meaning, do it once or twice in the essay, not over and over again. And qualifying statements, such as saying, it is lugubrious, yet melodical. Okay? So it can be mournful, it can be sad, it can be depressive, but it also has a musicality, like you would find in the poetry of T.S. Eliot, for instance. Okay? Try to find your own stunning metaphors. Try and find ways of explaining the effects of the language upon you. Remember that you are meant to be a live and living conscious thing. So just feature spotting and talking about pre-modifying qualitative adjectives doesn't really do much. What's far better is to talk about the impacts upon you as a reader. So the perfect analysis is to combine insight into a technique with some kind of qualitative description of the effect upon the reader. And it's particularly easy to do that in poetry, isn't it? Sensitive evaluation of the poetry. Evocative. I put there hunting, I meant haunting. Lyrical, resonant, sonorous. You know what I mean? Use these terms to show this kind of qualitative thing. I need to check my PowerPoint things, I don't know. This is Rich coming from me after my error. Spag. There are far too many errors, far too many, guys. In particular, young Ella Hanrahan, comma splices, which are ugly things grammatically, when we try to put sentences together with commas, when we should be using connectives or new sentences, okay? Now that's something that all of you need to look at really closely. Some of you have got some horrible sentences where you've tortured the sentence. You've sort of like made it so ghastly and long, etc. Nothing wrong with some short sentences occasionally. Obviously you have to use subordination. You have to use a number of complex sentences. You should begin some sentences with kind of frontal adverbials and all that kind of thing, clearly. But you don't need to do that all the time. A beauty lies in a combination of them, isn't it? Some short, sharp, focused statements also have great power, don't they? There's a lot of US spelling, especially the use of Zs in words such as civilize, etc. Please make sure you're using the British S. And just in general, just look over your grammar. Look over the kind of quality of expression. Ask yourself if this makes sense. That kind of thing is really important. Okay. Conclusions. Finally, conclude. Like introductions, they often feel a little bit dull and mechanical. And again, conclusions and introductions, the first and the last things that are read, are really important. So if you're just going to say, in conclusion, here's 2 lines. I'm just going to follow through. I know I have to put a conclusion down. So I'll just put a short summary of what I've said so far. Well, it's okay to do that if you want a B or a C. But if you want to move into high band 4 or band 5, you've got to, again, make the reader sit up a little bit. So it's a bit like debating. I wouldn't introduce new material, but I would kind of say something very insightful in the conclusion. I would look directly at the question and really answer it, but in a really interesting way that also synthesizes the material, but doesn't just recycle and regurgitate. Hard to know how to do that, but it's a real skill, isn't it? Otherwise you find yourself writing, in conclusion, I have shown you 2 or 3 lines of summary. So, in summary, guys, I think that will give you some general advice on how to improve things. I will sit with each of you and give you 5, at least 10 minutes, okay? And I will run a few things after school, after the mock. I would prioritize the mock for now. I hope that was useful, and good luck.